Now time for Crime Time. My guest tonight, retired Los Angeles Police Department Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey. Cheryl Dorsey started with the LAPD in 1980. She worked in patrol specialized units, including gangs, and she is the author of Black and Blue, the creation of a social advocate. Also with us, retired Deputy Inspector of NYPD's Corey Pegues. Corey was in law enforcement for 26 years, spent 14 years as a combat medic for the U.S. Army and New York National Guard. He's also a former prosecutor and author of the book Once a Cop: The Street, the Law, Two Worlds, One Man. We've got two of you here today, and I want to start with reaction to what came out of Louisville and what is still happening tonight in Louisville. The breaking news: an officer with the Louisville Police Department has been shot, according to the department. We don't have any details on the condition of the officer, but we do understand it was in connection to the protests that erupted following the announcement of charges in the Breonna Taylor case. Cheryl, to you, your reaction on, I guess, let's start with what's happening right now. The images we're seeing right now, it's very disconcerting to hear that an officer's been shot.
Well, certainly, I don't condone violence against the police, and so my sympathies go out to the Louisville Metropolitan Police Department, that officer and his family. With regards to what we heard today from the Attorney General, I heard a lot of double speak. I heard a lot of company speak. I think he was being intellectually dishonest. He cherry-picked evidence that he wanted to present to the grand jury. We know that there was allegedly one witness who said they heard the officers announce their entry, but there were other witnesses also who allegedly heard nothing. And so we know that there's a problem with this non-indictment, if you will, in that 3 officers were investigated. One was charged, and not with the murder of Breonna Taylor, but because he fired rounds into another individual's apartment. If the officers had announced and made entry as purported, that young man, Kenneth Walker, would now be sitting in jail for attempted murder on a police officer if he fired first, as they said. So this is their story, and they're sticking to it.
Corey, what's your take on that? What Cheryl was just talking about. There seems to be now. Today we learned that this was according to the officers and according to a witness, that they did identify themselves before breaking that door down. How important is that fact? And first, your reaction to the indictment and lack of today that was handed down.
Well, first of all, I'm a veteran of over 200 search warrants. A search warrant is one of the most dangerous things that a cop can do. And the people that's on a search warrant should be trained, highly trained individuals. And it's sad for me to hear that these cops that was at Breonna Taylor house were just extra cops. It's just like, we're going to take 3. We got 3 bozos. We're going to send them over there and tell them to go knock the door down and arrest her. That's not how you conduct a search warrant. And I'm still stuck on, how did we receive the search warrant? From what I understand, there was 5 search warrants executed that day for her ex-boyfriend. When was the last set of eyes we had on her ex-boyfriend going to the house? From what they're saying, he had a piece of mail there in February. The search warrant was in March. Who was the last person to see him there? How many looks did we have in the house that he had drugs in the house? Who assigned, like, what team did the search warrant? You sent 3 people there. Were there markings on the door to identify this is the location? Was a vehicle there? If I'm doing a search warrant and I'm a commander doing numerous violent search warrants, no knock and knock search warrants, those cops can't get the search warrant approved by me without telling me that they seen somebody, the subject, go into that house within the last 24 hours. And the time that we see him go into the house, I'm posting a cop in front of that building or that apartment to make sure that that subject don't exit. So I have serious issues with the search warrant being executed, especially I have some issues with the judge approving 5 search warrants, and out of her mouth, she approved them within 30 minutes. How can you do a search warrant approval in 30 minutes, 5 of them, because and they all had the same verbiage on it? That's another problem. So it's just like they was just pacifying these search warrants. But the problem with law enforcement is, like, the cops are laying in bed with the prosecutors are laying in bed with the judges. So this whole criminal justice system is out of whack. And poor Breonna Taylor, her life was taken.
Cheryl, isn't the outrage just what Corey talked about? Shouldn't the outrage be on the reason that these three were there, the search warrants, and the lack of accountability there? These three, the facts of the case, if indeed they did identify, they did break the door down, but then they saw this individual and he shoots a police officer in the leg, returning that fire with lethal force. Isn't that absolutely within their right in that situation?
Well, if you buy into that version and I don't, then certainly officers get to return fire if they're fired upon. But there's also
do you not buy into the fact that that Kenneth Walker fired the first shot?
I don't know if he fired the first shot.
He admits
That's
he did.
Well, that's what they say he admits. And so I haven't heard him in a courtroom say that he fired the first shot. That's what they say. And so listen, I'm not just taking wholesale what they say, because what they also said is that there was no one injured. What they also said is that there was no cameras on the officers, and we've seen a still photo of one officer wearing a camera. So listen, there's plenty for me to be bothered by. This Detective Hankerson came from Lexington Police Department before he was hired by Louisville, and he was problematic over there. One of his supervisors said they wouldn't even recommend him to be hired by another department, yet he was. We know that he has a disciplinary history. We know that he was facing several sexual assault charges on the Louisville Police Department. And so listen, let's not pretend that somehow these guys are choir boys and they were just, happened upon a house and they were just fired upon for no reason. They judge shopped to get that no-knock warrant. And I'm going to tell you what I know as a 20-year veteran patrol officer who's involved in search warrants. If you have a no-knock warrant, you don't announce because you don't have to. And so again, because they say they did and they found one witness versus several who said they didn't, that's what the story is and that's what we should go with. I'm not buying it.
Now, you're saying that the whole, basically what you're laying out is a total, everything's corrupt, everybody's in on it, AG all the way down. Is that your experience when you were with the LAPD? Did you do this, or did this happen all the time? And how flagrant is this?
Well, we
in
know
your
that
experience?
officers lie. So we know that officers lie. Now, did I lie when I was a police officer? No, I didn't. But do officers lie? Yes, they do. We see it not only recently in this case, but we've seen officers lie about reasons to justify deadly use of force. And listen, once they kill you, then there's only one version to tell. And because officers are given great deference, much like an attorney general, their version is usually taken whole cloth. And so please don't pretend that officers don't misrepresent the truth. And so we'll have to wait and see if they go to court, raise their hand, and testify under oath to the things that they're purporting to be facts today.
Fair enough. All right. Let's take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about a different case. Razor blades found on a playground. Crime Time continues right after this.
Help.
People of our community are very, very upset and disturbed by this behavior. As a department and as a father myself, it concerns me greatly.
All right, that's one of the stories we're covering on Crime Time tonight. Also, we're monitoring the situation in Louisville. My guests are still with me, retired Los Angeles Police Department Sergeant Cheryl Dorsey and retired Deputy Inspector of the NYPD, Corey Pegues. This next story comes to us from WXMI in Grand Rapids, Michigan. 40 razor blades found in a neighborhood park. Take a look.
People of our community are very, very upset and disturbed by this behavior.
A shocking discovery Monday evening after several razor blades were discovered at an Eaton Rapids park.
And one of the kids that was going down a slide had actually noticed one of these blades inside a slide.
Officers responded to Howe Memorial Park, where parents had already found and collected 39 razor blades around the park.
The vast majority of these blades were really just littered around the area. On the ground. There were very few that were positioned in such a way to really harm anyone.
Out of an abundance of caution, city workers went around to check for razor blades at other public parks, finding several of them lying in the grass here at Gar Island Park.
We're using roofing magnets that roofers commonly use to push across the ground to pull up any magnetized items that would be left on the ground. You know, as a department and as a father myself, it concerns me greatly.
Parents on scene at Howe Park reported seeing 2 teenage boys and 2 teenage girls walking away from the park shortly before discovering the blades. Police Chief Larry Weeks says they are now trying to find those teens to determine whether they are responsible.
We've been in contact with our local prosecutor. You know, we're talking about maybe an attempted assault charge, depending on the seriousness of it, maybe even upwards of an attempted felonious assault.
The city of Eaton Rapids has closed all public parks for the time being, giving investigators time to evaluate the situation and ensure they are once again safe for children.
You could be looking at a significant felony for assault with intent to do great bodily harm. You know, even the extent that, small child or somebody that couldn't withstand a blade like that, it could cause, even death.
All right, obviously it's very disturbing. How do you begin an investigation like this, Sergeant Dorsey? What would you do?
Well, one of the first things you would do is look for surveillance cameras in the area. Maybe residents may have something that will help you identify the possible potential suspects. Certainly, they have sounds like enough to follow up with these young people, and maybe just going forward, if time permits and they have the resources, to put some plainclothes officers in the vicinity to see if there are any repeat or copycat offenders.
Corey, who does this? What kind of a suspect are you looking for here?
Well, when I'm looking at is with the 4 teenagers, like Cheryl says, you definitely got to do at least a square mile area search for video cameras, because they had to walk. We had to catch an image of them somewhere within that park and in that area within a mile walking somewhere. The other piece, I would like to know what the gang activity is over there, because it seems as if somebody was planting razor blades. So it might be somewhere they're having gang initiations, or they might be getting ready to have a gang brawl. So they're getting their weapons and they're lining them up in the park just in case something happens. That's what I will be looking at. And of course, trying to get some young police officers that look like teenagers, freshly out of the academy, just to hang out in the area and see what they can come up with.
That's an interesting point. Sergeant Dorsey, do you think that it maybe isn't necessarily some horrible individual that's trying to injure little kids on a swing or a slide, that it could be something else going on here?
Well, listen, if it were 1 or 2 blades, I would, be willing to give someone the benefit of the doubt. But when we're talking about 40, that's a concerted effort to bring harm to a young person. And so now, we understand, if we didn't before, that we have to always be mindful of our surroundings. We have to have conversations with our young people, those who are old enough to understand, to be on the lookout for dangers no matter where they are. There is no safe place where we can let our children go and roam free without our oversight.
All right. Thank you both. Appreciate your insight on this case, and also your opinions on the Breonna Taylor situation unfolding this evening in Louisville, Kentucky. Thank you both. Still ahead on Court TV Live.